This is the same thing when we did referendum. Pumped it like crazy and test. Okay, we go. Yeah, just a second. I'm just getting you ready here. We'll give you an action when you're.
Hello. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm Barbie Smith with Student Services. Welcome to our second of 5 Parent Engage 360 events this year. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. The format for this evening will begin with Sue Abderholden from NAMI, Minnesota, who will be sharing information for the first hour. We will then move into our panel discussion for the second part of our event. We have participants here in person with us this evening as well as online. This presentation will be recorded and we'll be following up tomorrow by sharing the recording, a survey, and other relevant information. So, let's get started with Sue from NAMI.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I hope you're all taking a deep breath before we start. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, I can do that, sorry. So what are we all asking about lately, right? It seems like everywhere you go, if you look at newspapers, really just from around the country, but also the world, right? Everyone is asking, how are the children? So how are the children? And you might not know, but the U.S. Surgeon General actually came out with a report just yesterday calling it a public health crisis. And what they found is that 25% of youth are experiencing depression, another 20% anxiety. There's been an increase of 51% of suicide attempts among girls and 4% amongst boys. And I think what we all know is that our children are definitely struggling with their mental health due to the pandemic. But tonight, we really want to talk about, so how are the parents? Because parents have actually gone through a very difficult time as well. And I don't think we give enough attention actually to this subject. So tonight we're going to talk about parents and what you can do. So let's talk about the impact of the pandemic. We've been living with incredible uncertainty. When this first started around March 15th of 2020, right, we thought, we got this. We're going to be done in June. End of May starts coming, right? And we're like, okay, we're not done yet. We thought that we were doing a sprint, and then all of a sudden it became a marathon, except we had no idea how many miles it was, right? You know, June of this year came around, and we're like, we are getting there, right? And then what happened, right? Another variant, and now we're facing another variant and not knowing how it's really going to impact us. And while we can never be certain like what's happening in the future, that level of uncertainty really affects us in terms of kind of depression in some ways, right? But also anxiety about like, so when can we all get together? When can I travel again? When are my kids going to stay in school and not be quarantined or get sick and sent home? And we still don't have those answers. For a lot of people, especially those who were essential workers, who had to be with other people, whether it's teachers, people who worked in grocery stores, of course our healthcare workers, our mental health workers, right? They worried about catching COVID, maybe passing it on to family members, and what if somebody got really sick? And then, who was gonna take care of kids or who was gonna do whatever, right? So that was also really hard and really weighed on all of us. Being alone, so if you're parents, you probably weren't necessarily alone, but for people who had to be, that was really isolating, and perhaps you had a relative that was alone that you wanted to keep checking in on. But the other thing is, we are not used to being with our entire family for 24/7. Let's just face it, right? It's really hard, and you have no break from them, right? They are just always there, especially in the beginning, and that was really tough. We had some people, of course, who lost their jobs, which meant they lost their income, and so they worried about how do I pay the bills, and some of the eviction moratorium is coming off, and how is that going to impact people and things like that. And then another thing that we actually don't talk about enough is what I would call kind of ambiguous loss. So there's a lot of grief to the cancellation of events. And certainly teenagers, really, they didn't get their prom, they didn't get a graduation party, they didn't maybe go away to college, they didn't get any of that. And while at this age I can tell you I have no recollection at all of my high school graduation, when you are 17 and 18, it's a big deal, and you lost that. And even as a parent, you see how your kids struggled with that, right? And you worry about them. But even as adults, we lost out on things. Weddings, funerals. And part of the grieving process is to actually have a funeral and be able to get together with people, right? To share a meal, to cry, to laugh, all those kinds of things. Maybe it was the birthday of, your first grandchild, right? And things like that. So all of that was kind of that ambiguous loss, that grief that we didn't know how to deal with. And you as parents, you faced all of this as well. And it just isn't easy. We also saw parents, of course, trying to teach their children at home. Distance learning was not fun for most people. Now, some kids actually thrived because they weren't bullied. They could go at their own pace. They perhaps got more sleep because they didn't have to get up to catch the bus. I mean, there were some things like that that were the positive out of all of this, right? But for a lot of kids, they really did struggle. And if you were a parent of a child who was in special education, that had an IEP, maybe they had one-to-one paraprofessional in the school, you didn't get that at home. And so your stress levels also kind of went through the roof trying to figure out how to do this. Maybe you're trying to support someone who's elderly. Maybe they lived in the nursing home. Maybe they were living alone. Maybe a loved one with a disability. And of course, you couldn't find in-home support during most of the pandemic. And so you're trying to juggle all of these things. And while some people really enjoy working from home, a lot of people really don't. And let's face it, most people's homes are not set up ergonomically to do this. And not everyone has a huge house, right, where one kid could go in one bedroom, another one, the two parents in different rooms to do all their work. No. Most of you are crowded around a kitchen table. You're on a Zoom call, and somebody goes behind you, opening up the refrigerator, or the cat crawls over the camera, right, or a kid is screaming in the background, and all of a sudden the dog starts barking, and it is not fun at all for most people. The other thing to think about is Zoom fatigue, and it really is a thing. So normally, if we're like in a meeting, right, you don't see everyone at once. You're kind of looking here, then here, then here. On a Zoom, right, all these faces are up at you, or they have their cameras off and you don't know what they're thinking. But all those faces are up, and you're trying to get in all of that kind of the reaction and people's body language and all of that, and it's coming at you. And that's why you're so tired after a day of Zoom meetings, because your brain isn't used to seeing all that kind of stimulation at one time. I think there's also been kind of a feeling of helplessness throughout all of this, like, what can I do? What am I supposed to do? How can I deal with all of this? There's so much that we can't control in a pandemic, but we want to, and we can't. All we can control is things like, wearing a mask and, washing our hands and, getting vaccinated, those kinds of things. And so what we know is that most parents are feeling incredibly exhausted. This has just gone on so long that we just don't want to deal with it anymore. The other thing we have to think about is, just in terms of people, what's the impact of the pandemic? So, it's cumulative, right? 926,000 people in Minnesota. Total deaths is 9,616, which is a lot. Even hospitalizations, at 46. And, one thing that I also read about just today is 167,000 children have lost a parent or a caregiver. So we kind of forget also the impact of that grief on people, and it's not just for a month or two. Any of you who've lost a significant, loved one, you're looking at a year as you go through all of those different firsts, and it's really, really tough. We also know that of those children who lost a caregiver, 70% were 13 years or under. So that is going to have a huge, huge impact on children, and we can't forget that. One of the things I want to mention, too, is that while we're all in the same ocean, we're not in the same boat. So we do know the pandemic has not impacted people equally. So we know that people of color in particular have caught COVID at a higher rate, have been hospitalized at a higher rate, and have died at a higher rate. And so that has been a huge impact on that community as well. And then you add on some other things, frankly, George Floyd's, murder in Minneapolis and the impact that that has on the BIPOC community. We know that people from the Asian community have been attacked in parking lots and things like that, being blamed for COVID. So you have people from our communities of color and our diverse communities facing kind of additional grief, additional stress, different additional hardships. So we haven't all been impacted the same way. And I think that's just something that we need to keep in mind. So kind of knowing all of this, here's what we all feel like doing. I mean, let's just face it, right? We want to scream. We are so tired of this, and we're so tired of the stress, and it's just like everywhere. And I noticed it just driving here today, right? My daughter was driving me, and someone wanted to butt in, and she's like, I'm not going to let them in. I said, just let them in. Let's just take a deep breath. It's okay, let them in, right? And but we're all kind of on edge on all of this. I've never seen people be so angry before, and we just want to scream because it's just the stress is really, really out there. So what we know is that all of this going on, it's done a couple of things. So we know adults are struggling with mental illness as well and with their mental health, not just the kids, but adults as well. So depression and anxiety have really increased from 1 in 10 to 1 in 4. So what you're feeling could actually be real depression or real anxiety. There was a study done by the CDC, and they found that 36% of adults had difficulty sleeping, 32% had difficulty eating, 12% increase in alcohol use, so I think they lied on that one. You look at Facebook, how many memes are there about alcohol? It is all over the place. Go talk to a liquor store owner about the increase in sales, it's through the roof. So they're lying about the 12%, it's a whole lot more. And then 12% increase in worsening in chronic conditions. The one thing they found is that more women than men are struggling. And what they think it's related to is that largely women were responsible for distance learning. So they were trying to work and do distance learning at the same time, which means they were experiencing a lot more stress. We also found, disturbingly enough, younger adults with suicidal ideation, 18 to 26. And also higher incidence right now of psychosis, which we think is kind of related to that high stress. So some of our first episode programs in Minnesota now have long waiting lists. And so it's just another thing that young adults have had a hard time with. If you had a mental illness before COVID, it's also been really difficult. And as parents know who have a child with a mental illness, it was really true in terms of mental health treatment. Adults seem to adapt a little bit more easily to telehealth. Little kids, not so much. For an 8-year-old, you don't really do play therapy very well, on the computer. You also don't keep your attention span the same way. And it just made it a lot harder. It's different to watch a Disney movie on there, right, than it is talking to your therapist. And even for some adults, it was a little bit harder. We know that for some teenagers, actually trying to find that kind of privacy to be able to discuss was also kind of difficult, depending on your living situation. But it was a little better for adults, and that's a good thing to know. And then we also know now that once people catch COVID, and this percentage is going up, 34% then develop depression or anxiety. Among people who are having what we would call the long haul symptoms of COVID, it's even higher. And we think if you think about it, COVID is also kind of inflammation. We think about depression as an inflammation in the brain sometimes. And so we also have to be concerned about people who have caught COVID. Are they then experiencing symptoms of depression or anxiety? So as parents, what do we need to do? So we have to take care of ourselves. You've all heard the phrase, right? Put the mask on first, oxygen mask on first, and that we really need to do this. And now I know what you're all doing. Fat chance, right? Are you kidding me? I have no time to do this. And I know that it's absolutely true. And I will say that I've gone through periods of my life where it was like, there is no way I have time to take care of myself. At one point, my husband had this, kind of serious illness, and, so I was kind of doing everything, and, I would pull in the driveway, and it's like all I could do was take 5 seconds to breathe. But yeah, taking care of yourself right now, it's not an easy thing to do. But we have to figure out some ways, even though it's only a few minutes, to be able to do this. So we do know that when we have a lot of stress, that can spill over to our kids. Kids feel it. Some kids are much more aware than others. One of my daughters was much more sensitive. She knew the moment I walked into the room whether I was stressed out or not, right? So some kids are very aware. But it is kind of a contagion effect. And so we need to figure out when we're super stressed, are there some things that we can do that will help? We also know that, all these changing routines, that really has an impact too. And it impacts how they interact with us and other family members. So you might see kids fighting with each other more, right? Or yelling at you or your spouse more, or if there's another relative living in the house, all of those kinds of things. And then I think, sometimes, and rightly so, we're overwhelmed, right? We're overwhelmed with what's going on. And so that makes it sometimes actually hard to provide reassurance to our kids. And again, there is trust me when I say no blame or shame here at all. It's just, this is kind of what happens. And we all get there. We've all gotten there during the pandemic where we just didn't have anything left to give, right? And that happens. And that's why no matter what, and I know it's really hard to put our oxygen mask on first, we have to think of some things that will really help us. So I'm going to go through a few steps that you can take to better health. And things that hopefully will, not take a lot of time. I'm not asking you to join a 60-minute, Pilates class or anything like that. We're just going to talk about some ways that it really could help. So the first thing is to really think of some coping strategies. So I am not one who's going to sit there and meditate or do yoga for an hour. It's just not going to happen. But there are some short meditations that you can do. So I love the Calm app. There's another one called Headspace. They have like a minute meditation. So you could sit in your car for a minute and do that meditation. Or go into the bathroom and lock the door and do a 2-minute one, right? But you can do this. And it really, honestly, I didn't really believe in it at first. But it really does help even if I do a minute or two when I'm really kind of hitting that point, right, where you're so stressed out. So think about doing that. Another one is breathing. We just kind of take breathing for granted, and sometimes when we're really starting to get stressed out, we should think about doing this. It's pretty easy, actually. So the thing to think about with breathing is you breathe in fewer counts than when you breathe out. So if you were going to breathe in, so you would, like put your hand on your stomach, that helps, and breathe in through your nose, and then out with the whoosh. I tend to breathe in with 4. Breathe out with 5. I will actually literally do that in the elevator going up to my office or leaving. And it doesn't take long. Do it a couple of times, and you will start kind of feeling your heart rate kind of come down a little bit, your stress level come down. It's free. And again, we're not talking about even 5 minutes. Just do it a couple of times and see how much that helps. And then mindfulness is, you can do the face one. So focus what's in your control. There's a lot that we can't control, and you gotta let go of it. You just do, because there's just so much that we can't control right now. I can't control all of the cars that were lined up on 35W. I can't control that. I'm gonna let it go, right? I can't control that the person in front of me, when it said 10 items, actually has 42, right? I can't control that. I'm just gonna let it go. Acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. And this helps your kids too, to be able to just say, man, I have really had a tough day. I am really crabby. I am crabby right now. I am really highly stressed. I'm going to try to take care of it, but this is what I am right now. And, I think kids actually appreciate that instead of trying to guess, right? And so then they know, oh, you're not mad at me. You're just really stressed. Another is to kind of come back into your body, breathing, right? Put your feet on the ground, that kind of thing. And then really engage in what you're doing. And I just want to focus on engage in what you're doing. So let's think about how many of you watched a TV program last night and looked at your phone, not just during the commercials, but the whole time. Don't do that. Really. Put your phones away, because you're just making your brain go into 2 different places all at the same time. And right now, during the pandemic, we need to give our brains a little break. So don't do that. Put your phones away when you're trying to watch TV or do a game. So moving. We know that if we move, we get the endorphins going in our brain, and that helps us feel better. And there's lots of different things. They say try to do 30, 60 minutes a day. often you can't do that, so take however many minutes you can. I finally got one of these Fitbits so that I could watch how long I was getting up. I wasn't sitting there for a full hour and things like that, trying to move around. And it's helped just remind me. But there's all sorts of things you can do. Put some music on and dance with your kids and look like an idiot in the kitchen while you're making dinner, right? Just move around a little bit. Taking a walk. So I love taking walks. If your teen is kind of like really stressed out, take a walk with them because you don't look at each other. Same with driving in a car, right? You don't look at each other. It's the best time to have hard conversations with teenagers because you don't have to look at each other. But you can walk with them, and then you both kind of, around the block, we're not talking about a 10-mile walk. Walk a little bit. Get the endorphins moving in your brain. You'll be surprised. Bike, whatever it is that you can do. Jazzercise is coming back, I guess. So you can do some of those kinds of things. Nutrition. Now, we all moved to our comfort food during the pandemic, and understandably so, right? We gotta find something. But, it's been 18 months, 19 months. We should probably kind of back off a little bit on that and really look at trying to have healthy snacks. So, things like, almonds, right, is good. Fruit, vegetables. I keep little carrots in little tiny containers so you don't have to open up the whole bag, things like that. Drinking more water, it's getting warmer, it's gonna get, it's not as humid in the buildings. Drinking more water helps. Avoiding too much alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. And so while you might think it's kind of comforting for a little while, you just really want to be careful with that. And then just be attuned to emotional eating. I'm not worried about what people are saying when they get on the scale, but it's just kind of like all of a sudden we're like, oh, I've eaten that entire bag of potato chips and now I don't feel so good. And just really kind of think about, am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating to actually kind of calm my nerves and fill my stress bucket up? Sleep. So we know so much more about sleep than we did even, frankly, 20 years ago. And we know it is really important. And we also know that people have had a lot of trouble with sleep during this time. So let's think about how we deal with our kids when they're trying to get to sleep, right? Especially as toddlers, right? We try to make sure they go to bed at the same time. We have a routine for them, right? So first, we're going to take a warm bath, and then we're going to cuddle in the nice towel, and then I'm going to read, and I'm going to sing you a song, and maybe rock you, and then we're going to turn the light off, and I'll kiss you in the forehead, and I'll go. We need routines, too, sometimes as adults if we're having trouble sleeping. So try to go to bed at the same time. Have a routine. Don't look at your phone or your computer an hour before you go to bed if you're having trouble sleeping. That light, even when you turn it to the night light, is still not good for you. And then, what's the temperature like? Hot rooms don't really work very well for sleep. If there's light, maybe think about a sleeping mask. But whatever you can do, try to make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep. It really does help your stress levels a lot. I can tell when I've slept poorly and woken up, way too early, I'm not my best that day. So finding your quiet place, which I know. You're at home and the kids are on quarantine and you're really asking me to find my quiet space. But sometimes you can do that. So I like this mom. She said, I locked myself in the bathroom for 10 minutes. I told the kids they couldn't disturb me unless they were bleeding profusely. And I lit a nice candle, took deep breaths, read a page or two of my book. So, it can be 4 or 5 minutes and just do that. And I did that often. When my kids were little, because sometimes we just had to do that. And what you are showing them is that you're actually taking a break. You're showing that's a good thing to model, right? It's like, oh, man, I'm really stressed out. I'm just going to go in here for a few minutes. You'll be fine. I just need to do this. And again, I know you can't take 30 minutes, but you could take 5 and help your stress levels come down. Another thing is positivity, which, again, during the pandemic has been a little tough, right? But what we know is before you get out of bed in the morning, say just 3 things that you're grateful for. I'm, grateful for my spouse. I'm grateful that it's not below 0 this morning. I'm, grateful that that meal last night was really good. Whatever it is, think of 3 things, because you've already put your brain then on a positive spin. Seems really corny, I know, but there's actually studies that show that, focusing on the positivity really works. Sometimes it can be something as watching an uplifting movie, right? I love those guys. What are they called? It'll come to me. They have the big eyes, and they're yellow. The Minions. Oh, the Minions. I love the Minions. I can't stop laughing when I see the Minions, right? I actually have a little Minion doll at my office that I look at when I've had a really bad phone call. So do something that makes you smile, that makes you laugh. One of my staff, he has a picture of this really cute little kitten that's smiling, baby kitten. And so when he's feeling really stressed, he just looks at the kitten on his phone. And so, you know, you can do little things like that just to kind of trick yourself in a way, but do some of those things. So I remember when this all first started, I'm on Facebook with some women that are a lot younger than me, and they were like, okay, I'm going to teach my child French. We're going to make, crepes during the day, and we're going to do all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the first week of distance learning, they were like, okay, forget this. Forget this. I can't do this. And I think that's important, right? Because no, not everyone is, going to clean out their closets, do this big remodeling projects. I mean, some people did, but you know what? The rest of us are just trying to get through this, and that is perfectly okay. So you need to ban that perfectionism, because in a time of a pandemic, in a time of great stress, guess what? You're not going to be perfect. And if you think you're going to try to be perfect, then you're going to be beating yourself up because you're not perfect. So just ban it. We're in a pandemic, and you can blame it on the pandemic, right? I can't clean my closets out, so it's a pandemic. Goodwill is backed up, You can say, oh, I'm not going to make all those home-baked cookies this Christmas. You know why? Because it's a pandemic. So just blame it on it, right? But don't be perfect, really. It's really okay. Technology boundaries. So again, not looking at your phone, those kinds of things during meals. Put them in a basket, or watching TV. It really, it really does kind of disturb your brain to try to be doing all those things at the same time. Try not to bring those things into the bedroom, because then you're going to look at it, and then you're going to stay awake, and you're going to be, trolling through TikTok or whatever. And make sure that, especially it's hard when you're also working from home, don't do the emails all the time. Pick the times when you're going to work, but it's harder, of course, to find those kind of boundaries. It's not really work-life balance anymore. It's work-life harmony in a sense. And so say, I'm not going to look at emails after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever it is, but give yourself some boundaries so that you can kind of detach from work a little bit. And I'm going to say I'm pretty bad at that, but I have given up watching and responding to emails while I'm watching a TV show with my daughter, but I'll pick a time then later to kind of make sure there's nothing urgent in my inbox. And, if you're really struggling, seek help. It really is okay. We have been through a lot during this pandemic. Some people have lost loved ones. You've had an enormous amount of stress. It's okay to seek help. You should check with your employee assistance programs. A lot of, organizations, businesses have them, companies. They are rarely used, actually. The usage rate is really low. But you could talk to someone. Usually they give you like 3 to 5 visits free. Sometimes just talking to someone can just be helpful. And they might give you some strategies. If you're trying to find a therapist, we actually recommend going to Fast Track or MN, because you can put in your zip code, you can put in your insurance company, and you can actually click to say who has immediate openings. And so it can be helpful, because you want to make sure that you're finding someone in your network, or you're going to pay more. And of course, there are waiting lists a lot of times. I think it's a little easier actually for adults than kids right now, but it's something that you can do. And sometimes it just means reaching out and talking to other people. Maybe there's a book club that you used to be involved in before, the pandemic hit. Maybe it's your neighbor, or a sibling or something like that, just to be able to say, I'm just having a really bad day today. Can we just talk? You want to go for a walk, or something like that. But sometimes you just really have to kind of go outside of your kind of normal activities and say, I just need a little help through this. And honestly, because it's really been really, really hard, don't be ashamed to reach out. It's really okay. I want to talk just a little bit before we lead into the panel about the impact on students as well. So, especially when you think about the developmental stages of kids, right? This isolation has been really hard for them. I mean, think about, kindergartners who missed being in the building, right? And what do you learn in kindergarten, right? Well, I know you're supposed to be reading now, but you're supposed to learn to get along with other kids, right? You're supposed to learn about sharing. You're supposed to learn about those kinds of things. It's really social development at that age. And with schools shutting down, they also lost their routine. And that's really hard for kids. Kids like routines. For teens, reduced social life and a lot of physical activities went away. A lot of them experienced sleep difficulties. There might be disharmony at home, right, because people are struggling and everyone's so stressed out. Excessive screen use, right, because we didn't want them looking at the screen all day long, but they really had to, and that was difficult. Unhealthy diet, and actually, high and continuous stress, which also isn't healthy for them. So some of the warning signs that you need to think about, it's really about changes. Right? So sleeping more than they used to, sleeping less than they used to. Eating more than they used to, eating less than they used to. Putting themselves down, I'm stupid, right? I'm ugly, all of those kinds of things. And we know, especially now because they testified before Congress, Instagram hasn't done a great job, especially for girls and body images, right? They're looking at TikTok as well. All those things we need to look at. Kids they stop doing the things that they used to like to do, and not just because they're not allowed to do it, but because they just don't want to anymore. Could be music, could be sports, it could be a number of different things. Suddenly doing poorly in school, which right now it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest, because, some kids, again, did well with distance learning, some kids did not. Being irritable. When we think usually about depression, we think about somebody crying all the time and curling up into a ball. But with teenagers, it's really about them being angry, which I know can be hard to tell from normal teenagehood to whether it's this. But we also always talk about kind of the length of time and the intensity. And so that's what you need to think about. Feeling hopeless, like, this is just horrible. It's not going to get any better. And this is when we have to kind of buck ourselves up and say, it will get better. We know it's really difficult. We don't know exactly what it's going to end, but we are going to get through this, and we'll get through it together. Being really distracted from things, really having difficulty concentrating, and that's true, frankly, for us as adults, too, with depression. It can be really, really hard. Grief can actually do the same thing, make it really hard to concentrate. Problems making decisions. Because in some ways, it's just too hard. There's too many things going around in my head. I'm not sure which is the good decision or the bad decision, or which one's going to be better or worse, and so you just don't make any decision. Just slowing down. So I've had many family members with serious depression, and they've talked about it as kind of those old army blankets, getting them really wet and then, ice cold, and then carrying it. That you just actually feel that kind of physical burden. Forgetfulness, that can be, frankly, a huge one on this. Being sad, just really hypersensitive. And you see that a lot with teens, but I think especially now, you might even see that even more. And then isolating from friends. Now that they can finally kind of come back together, they're still isolating from them. Starting to hit a crisis, and I would say this is actually for kids, but also for other adults in your family that you want to look for as well. Inability to cope with daily tasks, right? Just not being able to do some of those things that, whether it's, getting the cereal out in the morning or putting a load of laundry in or, getting ready to go to class. Those rapid mood swings, like being fine and then all of a sudden not being fine. That increased agitation, right? Abusive behavior, losing touch with reality. We've seen that a lot lately. Further isolating, and then unexplained physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, things like that. And that always shows us, right, that our head is connected to the rest of our body, because we see that. You can go to any emergency room doctor and ask about people that come in they think they're having a heart attack, and they're really having a panic attack, because you just feel your heart beating up against your rib cage, right? And you're sure that you're dying of a heart attack, and it really is a panic attack. And so we just have to remember that, everything's connected. And so they might see it emotionally coming out, you might feel it physically, but you really need to pay attention to those things. These are, whoops. These are some of the youth suicide warning signs. Threatening to kill themselves. And you can actually ask, it doesn't plant the idea, you can ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Current talk of suicide, making a plan, strong wish to die, abusing substances, overwhelming emotional pain or distress, really not sleeping at all, again, feeling like there's no reason to live, feeling trapped, there's no way out, withdrawing, all those things, again, angry, anxious. You really, when they're starting to be this kind of strong, you really, really want to pay attention and just don't wait about it. You want to reach out right away. The other things you want to be worried about too is, I didn't even touch it. I don't know why I did that. Some other things that you want to watch for is if they've had a previous suicide attempt, you want to kind of watch for those signs to make sure there isn't a second one. Gun or stockpiling pills, and I just really want to, tell families, especially right now during the pandemic, get rid of the guns in your house. Make sure get them to a relative or something like that. If you're going to keep them in your home, they've got to be locked up. You have to have safe storage. You have to keep the ammunition away. And if you're worried about your teen or anyone else in the house, make sure that any over-the-counter or prescription drugs are all locked up, and you keep the key with you. You don't use a kind of lock case that has numbers, because every kid's going to know you used your birth date or the street address. So you want to have a key, and you want to keep it with you. If they're being a little bit more, risk-taking, especially if they're giving away prized possessions, cutting that might happen, or chronically missing school would all be kind of additional signs. It's really picky. These things are things that you want to be careful of, right? These are not necessarily like warning signs, but these kinds of things, especially with teenagers who can be more impulsive, are things you want to think about. So if a kid's suspended from school, right, or if they had a job and they were fired from it, and I would say that would be for an adult who loses their job. Unexpected loss of freedom or fear of punishment. For example, adults who get picked up and brought to jail. They can be very high risk. Feeling embarrassed or humiliated in front of peers. We know that goes away, right? But teenagers don't. Being assaulted or bullying, we know bullying plays a huge role. A death in the family, especially if it's by suicide. Financial problems, including within the family. People had to move, which happened a lot during the pandemic, and any, loss of a major relationship, romantic breakup. We know that losing, a boyfriend or a girlfriend or, significant other in high school, you really, when you turn 65, you won't remember it all. But again, it's a big deal at that age. So here's what we need to think about in our response to teens, and I would say, frankly, in some ways to other adults as well. So what are the words that we're using, right? And again, making sure they understand, it's safe to talk to me. If you're really afraid that they're suicidal, ask. It doesn't plant the seed. Providing that support, I'm here. I know everyone's really stressed out right now. I know it's been a really hard time, but I really am here for you. Acknowledging it, right? Not denying it, but acknowledging that they too are experiencing a lot of stress, and saying what you see. So, and I would say this is actually true for adults as well. Like, I've noticed that you've gotten up in the middle of the night and you're staying up for hours. I've noticed that you're eating everything in the refrigerator. I've noticed that you're not texting your friends anymore. I've noticed that you are really have a hard time getting to work on time. Say what you're actually noticing. Again, difficult conversations, best when you don't have to look at each other. Go for a car ride, go for a walk together. It really is great. Talk to the primary care physician, whether it's a pediatrician or a family physician, talk to them. You want to make sure it's it's not another healthcare condition that could be coming in there, so be sure to talk to them. Check your insurance network, so who's in your network, who could they go see. It's great because, Anoka has, school-linked mental health, has mental health professionals in the school, so you definitely want to reach out to them, to all the school resources. And then know that actually we have crisis teams in every county in Minnesota. We're one of the few states that do that. It's true there isn't really one full number. You can do star crisis, but you want to look up your team that covers Anoka County, for example. But sometimes you have to call the police, and so you want to be sure that you know what to say when you call the police. You want to let the police know what's happening, whether it's a teen or an adult that is struggling with their mental health, because then they can send out an officer who's trained. You want to also say if there's any weapons in the house. You want to say what you want to have happen, like I'd like them brought to the emergency room. So you want to make sure you're really clear about that when you call. The National Suicide Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. I would really recommend that you put it in your phone now, because you're not going to remember it, and then you're going to try searching for it on the web when you need it. So put it in there now. Most teens, of course, never make a phone call. They text, and so they can text MN for Minnesota to 741-741. You might want to write that down on a Post-it note or a piece of paper and actually put it on your refrigerator. Put it there. You don't have to say to your teen, you should do this, right? But you can put it there for everyone to know that this is a number that they can call, and it's 24/7. NAMI actually provides lock boxes to families to be able to put medications in, and on the outside of the box, we actually have all the crisis numbers. And so if you need one, you can just give us a call and we'll do that. And again, there's star crisis, which generally works from a cell phone. Once in a while, it doesn't work very well. And last, I want to just talk about compassion. We don't act our best in a crisis. We've all hit those moments where we've been stressed and done something that we weren't exactly thinking, like, maybe we shouldn't have done that, right? Whether it's cutting someone off, yelling someone at Target. I remember those, kind of first days, trying to find toilet paper somewhere in the metro area, right? And, kind of harassing the poor young person at Target, saying, well, when is your next shipment? What time should I come, right? And I felt terrible about that later. I did actually go back up and apologize to him, but I was getting a little desperate. But we've all done things, during these last months that we think, oh, I was not the best that I could be. And so one of the things that we need to do is think the best of people, right? With my daughter in the car today, maybe that person's in a real hurry. I think they probably have to turn right at this light. It's on Hiawatha. All the cars are backed up. Just let them in. And actually, this person did have to take a right. So they didn't have much time to be able to move over. So, we really want to think the best of people. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they need to really get home and they're late. Maybe something else is happening in their lives. And give what I would call people grace and space. When we kind of say, oh, sure, come in, right? Or, somebody's struggling in the grocery store to get something and we help them reach it, right? When we actually kind of reach out and help other people and not make a big deal about it, don't you feel better? Someone's trying to get in and you're screaming at them. Your blood pressure is going up. You're getting more stressed out. But if you just kind of say, oh, come on in, right? You're just feeling like, well, I just did a good thing, right? You just feel better about yourself. You feel less stressed. So just keep those two words, right? Grace and space, just keeping about it. How are we going to give people grace and space during the rest of this pandemic? Because you're going to reduce your own stress levels if you do that. And that's my piece.
We just want to say thank you, Sue. Thank you for that information. It's so critical, and it helps support our students and our families and our parents in the Anoka-Hennepin community. Next, we are going to transition to our panel. It's a panel of school district and community experts. Our panel will be answering questions that were submitted from our participants when they registered for this event. At the end of the panel discussion, we will share additional information if you have questions that come up along the way. Thank you to our panel, Sue, Julia, Christy, and Cindy, for being here with us this evening. And we'll take just a moment as we set that up. So we're good to go? Okay. I'll let everybody say just a brief thing. Just say your name, where you're from, and how you fit into the event this evening.
So Sue Abderholden with NAMI, Minnesota, and a family member.
I'm Julia Messenger. I'm a social worker for Anoka-Hennepin School District and the social emotional learning teacher on special assignment.
Hello, everybody. I'm Christy Haustein. I'm with Headway Emotional Health, and I oversee some of our school-based therapists in the district.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Hiltz, and I'm the Director of Nursing for Anoka-Hennepin Schools. And I think the information with the connection between mental health and physical health is so important, so that's why I'm on the panel.
All right. Our first question of the night is, what mental health resources are available for my children, and how can I access them? So through Anoka-Hennepin School District, it really depends on if you're thinking about overall mental health and well-being or a clinical mental health diagnosis. So overall well-being, we have a lot of basic level 1 things available for all kids. They have access to nurses, to school social workers, to school counselors and admin and teacher supports. At elementaries, we have calming tools available in classrooms to support children when they're feeling big feelings. And at secondary, we have messages coming out to support students to know who they can access within the school buildings and who they can access should things rise to a higher level of need. And so some things to consider is when your student is calm and regulated, maybe in the car or on a walk, talking with them about, hey, who do you talk to at school if you're just kind of overall upset, or if it moves to a level of specific need, or if you're in a crisis situation? Who are those people? And then also talking about who are the people at home or in the community that you can connect with in those same different 3 levels. When you're just experiencing an everyday stressor, when you're really feeling lots of stress, and when you might be in a crisis situation. And talking about that when everyone is calm really will help should any of those needs arise for you. So through our school district, if you're not sure, hey, who is that for my student and I would like to know, I really recommend reaching out directly to the school and asking administration or school counselor or support staff. All of our school buildings either have a school social worker or school counselors to support you and your student with various mental health needs. All right, how can we help minimize the negativity? I'm gonna give this to Sue.
So I think some of it is actually focusing on the positive, right? It's not below 0 today. The sun's coming up tomorrow. Doesn't the snow look pretty? Not that it's slick, right? And just trying to kind of turn that around and talk about things in the more positive way. And I know that that's hard because there are some days where you just feel really negative about everything that's going on. And so you really have to be really conscious about it and think about those positive things. Again, pull up, photos or things like that that help you feel more positive. Whether it's, baby kittens, or little puppies or, beautiful flowers, or your kids when they were little babies, right? Whatever it is that can help you kind of smile about it and then really just try to, say those positive things. Because if you keep saying it over and over again, it's going to be okay. I mean, I think you've heard the story about the little boy who was in the horse barn, and he was shoveling out all of the, horse stuff. And somebody came by, and he's smiling and whistling, and somebody came by and said, "Why are you smiling? Look at the work that you're doing." And he goes, "Well, with all of this poop in here, there has to be a pony." And so, sometimes you just have to kind of turn that story around, that negative story in your head, and try to look for the positives.
I like that one. How can parents help? I'm gonna give this one over to Christy.
So I have to thank Sue, because her presentation, I think, led into a lot of my thinking around this question of the needing to put your oxygen mask on first. So I think that's where we start, is by, as adults, supporting young people, and as parents and caregivers in their lives, of making sure that you're attending to yourself. Also, attending things like this, gathering resources, information, so you feel equipped to be able to support your child, and building a community, whoever that may be around you, building a community of support so that you're not in it alone. No parent should be going through this alone. There's lots of support, especially within the schools, to come alongside you and go through it with you. I think, and this also came, Sue talked about it in her presentation, but of really coming alongside your child in a supportive way and really avoiding shaming and blaming. Sometimes some of the behaviors our children have can be really frustrating, and we're also stressed out in the moment, and we need to get to work in the morning. You need to get out of bed and go to school, and trying to stay away from that shame and blame and really come alongside them and try to understand and support them. I think also keeping the door open is important in conversations of, maybe you don't want to talk about it right now, but I just want you to know, you can come to me and you can talk about that. So like letting it be okay in the moment, like maybe you don't want to talk now, but I want you to know that I'm here to support you, and you can come talk to me about those things. So that's a little bit.
And what are some strategies for calming kids who have anxiety? Christy, back to you.
Sure. So I'm going to talk more kind of in general terms of that. I think there's a multitude of strategies, and I think it really can be specific to your own child, kind of the age of your child, where your child is developmentally, what things that they'll maybe at times buy into, that they're like, I'm not going to do any of that, deep breathing stuff. I'm not going to do that. So really finding what fits for your child and working with the folks that are in your child's life too, to develop things that might work for them. So in general terms, I think consistency is key. So having some consistent, predictable environments. Sue touched on also of eating and sleeping, getting some physical activity, which is difficult this time of year also, but attending to that kind of overall health and well-being of that our whole bodies need to be taken care of in order to be regulated, healthy humans. Yeah, so I think of having some regular, the other thing when I think about coping strategies, and something I always say to parents is it can't be that we just say, do that deep breathing when you're really dysregulated. It has to be that we practice it on a regular basis. So that kind of ties into that consistency. We have to be practicing this every day. We have to be taking care of ourselves every day. We can't only take care of ourselves when we're having a panic attack or dysregulated in the moment. So that's something that I always want to focus on as well.
Yeah, I'm going to add from the school perspective too, to feel free to partner with, at elementaries, it's going to be your school social worker and your school support staff, administrator, and teacher. And at secondary, whether it's school-based mental health therapist or school counselor, school social worker, and for students who have IEP minutes with a school psychologist, connecting with that whole team to really talk about what your students' unique needs are. Because as we know, anxiety shows up differently for all of us. We feel it in the body in different ways, and helping our students to name what that is. So really increasing their vocabulary of understanding how those feelings and the body are connected and how it's showing up for them in order to best find what is going to help them move through it. So for some of us, on some days, it might be something really physical, and on another day, it might be a cat picture or something funny to distract our brain. And knowing that there are different options, and we're going to kind of figure out what works for you. Sometimes I compare it to a menu at a restaurant. One day I might want this, and another day I might want something totally different. Some days I just need a little snack. Some days I'm ready for the whole meal. So depending on what the stress level is or what your environment has been like, something that might feel like a small problem could get a big reaction. And just knowing and understanding, how do we teach our kids that vocabulary to expand their understanding of it? All right. How can I help my teens with depression and anxiety, which arose during virtual learning? Sue, I'm going to give this over to you.
I'm sorry. It's not easy. So let's just put it there. One of the things that I think can help teens, though, is to to help them understand that, you know, it's kind of like each generation faced different difficulties. And their entire generation went through something that none of us have ever gone through that are alive right now, right? We weren't here for the Spanish flu. And so to really talk about the fact that they have made it through this. They went through one of the most difficult periods of time, and they were resilient. And so sometimes really focusing on, yes, we totally understand that you've been depressed and you're dealing with anxiety during this, but let's talk about how resilient you are. Let's talk about the strengths that helped you get through this. And, you know, I think that helps. And you've got, you know, a lot of young people who are in some ways more activists too. So to say, you know, again, it's been a very trying period, and let's talk about what we've learned from this, right? And then I think the other things is really just kind of talking to them, again, when they're not like super stressed out. You know, so what are you doing to help cope with some of this? You know, because you're old enough to kind of develop some of the things. And if they need help, you know, figuring out some other things that might be helpful, you know, talk about breathing, you know, do those kinds of stuff. I know that, you know, one of my daughters had pretty extreme anxiety and sometimes would call from school, and I knew it was her because there was no one breathing on the other line, end of the line. And so I would just start breathing. I would just say, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, breathe out. And then pretty soon she started breathing with me, you know, to kind of calm herself down. And so sometimes you have to do those things too. But I would just be really open about it and acknowledge that it's been really difficult and they've made it through. And, you know, let's kind of go from here. What are some other strategies to, you know, help you feel better in terms of the future? Because we're not out of this yet.
How can I help further support my children's mental health? Coming back to you, Sue. Okay.
You know, I think it's using some of the strategies that I talked about that help you for your mental health and using them with your kids. I mean, there's no reason, again, that you can't all be dancing in the kitchen, you know, just don't put it on TikTok. I know they keep going, you know, the sun comes up, you know, whatever that one is that everyone's dancing to, but, you know, but you don't have to put it up on TikTok to do it. You know, taking a walk together, making a healthy meal together, do those kinds of things together, and also showing them. And I know, again, you've got a million things on your plate, but if you show that, you know, I'm stressed out, so I'm going to sit here and just be quiet for a little bit, or you know what, I'm going to breathe. You want to breathe with me? Because I know it can really help. Just showing them the ways that, some strategies to help with their own mental health, showing them that you do it too is also helpful. And honestly, I can't think of, I doubt if there's anyone out there that hasn't felt the stress of the pandemic and hasn't dealt, you know, some days when they've been feeling depressed or anxious. We've all been there. And so, you know, kind of doing those strategies is just really, really important.
How are mental and physical health connected? Cindy, I'm coming to you for this.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the physiology in our bodies. So we all have our brains, which is our main board in our computer that's telling us what to do. It's controlling what's going on. Then we have the other parts of our system, including the autonomic system, which does your automatic things. Your brain automatically tells you to breathe and for your heart to keep running and for many things to happen in your body. And then we have the somatic nervous system that's telling our muscles what to do. And so we have all these nerves and wires running through our system, but they're all connected in the brain. And so when your body sometimes get those wires a little confused, an emotional concern can result in a headache, a stomach ache, all kinds of other somatic concerns. I'm going to talk about one that's really sort of different, but I think it exhibits it really well. We have some students in our schools right now that have something called pseudo-seizures. So usually a seizure is caused by an abnormal electrical change in your brain. In this instance, that's not what's happening. There's an emotional issue that is causing the brain to have a seizure. The children aren't doing it on purpose. They have no voluntary control over that, but they look just like they're having a true seizure. They're maybe unconscious on the floor. Their body might be jerking like grand mal seizures. and it's all being caused by emotions. And so we need to remember that our body is a whole person. And several times people have talked about a holistic approach to our care. And so yes, taking care of yourselves helps emotionally, and taking care of your emotions helps physically.
What are some signs of anxiety and depression, and how can I help my child?
So I think Sue covered this really well. And what I like to emphasize as a mental health professional, but also as a parent myself, of we know our children, and I would say any change in functioning from their normal daily functioning, we should pay attention to, right? We should key in on, we should pay attention to, and say, I'm curious, what's going on here? And start to track. Sue talked about frequency and intensity. So kind of for the duration that it lasts and the intensity of what you're seeing outside of that normal functioning. Definitely some of the kind of key pieces are those patterns of like, how are they sleeping? Are they sleeping more or are they sleeping less? How are they eating? Eating more or less? I think for our young people, also social connection and avoidance. So avoidance of maybe things that they used to enjoy that they're no longer taking part in. And I think a big one is avoidance of school too. And if you see change in their school functioning, maybe changes in grades or wanting to avoid school, tardiness, and not attending school. But really, any change in functioning we should pay attention to, and then when it will last for a period of time, that's when we want to, some of the supports that Julia talked about too, of we want to then maybe reach out to those supports, say, hey, what are you noticing at school, and how do we partner to support our children? Again, don't go it alone.
Can I add one thing? I just want to add one thing, and that is that it's really important for parents to talk to the teachers and the other school personnel, because kids sometimes exhibit different things at home than in school. So some kids, like with anxiety and depression, because they're so focused on being good in school, will keep it all in, and then they get home and they explode, right? And then the parent goes to talk to the teacher, and they're like, well, she's fine in school, but it's like, but she's not at home. And that could be why. And it could be reversed, that the parent and the family has figured out how to adapt for the child and figured out how to help them, do well at home. But, a new teacher might not know those same strategies, and so the child isn't doing as well in the classroom. And so it's so important that we work with our teachers, and the school support personnel so we get the full picture of what's going on with the child.
What are the schools able to provide the parents in regards to mental health? So specifically, if we're speaking about supporting parents with mental health and adult mental health, I would lead into what's been mentioned a few times tonight, but the community that's available and connecting with what are the resources, looking at the slides from Sue tonight, what are the things available to me as an adult? And if we're considering in regards to our students, what's available for parents for my own students' mental health, I think it's really crucial to reach out directly to an individual building about your student and connect with their support staff and talk with their team about your concerns, because everyone truly is living in this pandemic right now with different needs and stressors and worries. And so to really ask what is available and contact directly that support team, and then thinking through, again, working as a community partnership. We have other agencies that we're working with closely in Anoka-Hennepin. We're partnering with our school-based mental health therapists, and how do you really come together to support our kids? Because we're strength in numbers and stronger as we work together to really get the full picture of what our students are experiencing. I am concerned about my child's mental health. What kind of communication or tools are there for parents to help kids adjust and feel safe at school? Yeah, I again am gonna go back to contacting the school directly about your student's experience so far, what they've communicated to you. Make sure that they have a trusted adult at school. Who is that person? And sometimes when our students are starting somewhere new or transitioning especially, we think about how stressful those times are. Sue mentioned things like prom and graduation and how important they are developmentally in their world. And the same is true when we think about our young kids entering kindergarten or first grade, or our students going from 5th to 6th, or from middle to high school. Those transitional times can be incredibly stressful. Being in a new space can be stressful. We think about, even as adults, the process that we go through of not knowing what to expect, not knowing what's coming. So as much as you can assist with planning routine, talking about routine with them, maybe the night before they go to school saying, what's your first thing tomorrow? Let's just start with that. What do you do right away when you get there? And in regards to a new building or feeling safe at school, when you're talking with that support staff or trusted adult, making sure they feel comfortable with the lay of the land, first of all. Where is everything I need? Where's the bathroom? Where is my classroom or my locker? And really limiting those unknowns as much as we can, so we go back to what do we have control of, and what do we know. What are some good tools and or apps I can recommend or use with my child for anxiety or depression?
So again, Headspace, is good, and Calm. All those things work actually really well. And I know there's some other things that have come out too, like online cognitive behavior therapy and some things like that. But I think just helping kids really figure out, again, short meditation. There's actually on the Calm app, they even have like bedtime stories for adults and teens. They're hysterical. I laughed instead of falling asleep, but you should try them. But they try to do all those kinds of things. So, and they're, both of them are free. You can pay to get everything on them, but you can get the basic things for free, which I think are helpful. But I would also ask them, what is it that kind of helps you and that you need, and then kind of look. There are so many apps out there right now. People are rating them. I bet our office gets, once a week somebody wanting us to endorse some app, and I'm like, I don't have time to do that. Sorry. But there are a lot that are out there, and NIMH has National Institute of Mental Health has put some things up on their website as well. So if you need something more than those two, do some research. Make sure that they're trusted sites, but you can find some other things that I think would be helpful. And I would say actually to stay away from some things. So, I actually think we do need to limit kids' use of things, like Instagram, like TikTok. The guy who heads up Instagram was, before Congress, and, now they're talking about doing it for younger kids, and they aren't good. So you really do want to limit their time on those things.
My child has difficulty with stomach aches and headaches. Is it better to keep them home or send them if we think it's related to mental health?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying we're going to first assume that the stomachache or the headache has a physical cause. And in the medical world, we then rule out by doing some more assessment to make sure that whatever is going on is not having a physical cause that we could be fixing. Then after that happens, we're going to suggest that a mental health therapist or provider gets involved, because the plan for your child is going to really vary on how they are and where they are in the progress in that plan. And sometimes our kids get a little bit better and then they backslide and they don't do as well. And so at one point it might be, we know this is caused by a mental health anxiety. We have worked up to the point where we're expecting you to come to school and spend at least 2 hours there. And we're having to back off a little bit because the child's struggling. And then we're going to check in with the mental health therapist again and the provider and see what the next step is to help that child learn some coping skills to be in school. Sometimes it might be that we're finally to the point where we know the coping skills and we start using those at school. So when the child shows up in the health service with a headache, we say, what was the plan when you get your headache? Let's do that together. Or here's a space that you can just concentrate, do your calming, have 5-minute break or whatever it is, and get back to the normal routine. So that's an iffy answer. It just really depends on where you're starting from.
Yeah, and I'm going to share also, our goal is always to help students to know that they can be successful with a mental health diagnosis. You can come to school, you can have a job, you can be successful with those things. And as Cindy mentioned, we work incredibly closely, our mental health supports, whether it's school-based mental health, school social workers, counselors, and other staff, partner often with nurses because a lot of things do show up physically in our bodies. And once medical is ruled out, we team to implement that plan and support your student. I have a child with anxiety. What can I do to help my child's siblings and not leave them out when I'm so focused on my child with greater needs?
So first off, want to validate for parents, whoa, that's a lot, right? So I think the grace and space is something to embrace in that moment, of make sure that you embrace grace and space for both yourself and other people in your family. And then I think it's about intentionality too. And I always go back to, like, you can't pour from an empty cup, that you have to put your face mask on first before you can help others. So I think it's intentionality about how do I find that grace and space for myself, and then how do I do that for each of my children? So maybe it's scheduling a little bit of time with each child so that you can be really intentional. And that time doesn't have to be a significant amount of time. It can be that, like our thing is we have a really intentional bedtime. And we check in about the day and we tell stories or whatever it may be. Or we really like to watch this show together. So we're gonna be really intentional about taking that half hour in the evening. And that can be spread throughout a whole week too. So maybe you have your intentional time with one child on Tuesday, your other child, it's something you do together on Saturday. And I think having grace for yourself of, it can't be every moment, right? But the moments that count are those really intentional times that you spend with your children. So embracing those small moments that you can be really intentional and feel like you're giving them that attention and space that you're wanting to give them.
Can I add one thing? One other thing, and depending on the age of the siblings, is actually to really explain it to them so that they kind of understand what's going on, and then ask them to help. Sometimes I think, especially with teenagers, they kind of get in their own world. But when teenagers, for example, volunteer and help others, when they're assigned to be a buddy of a younger kid in a school, and if they can help that other child in your family, they might actually feel more engaged and not left out, especially if you give them kind of specific things to do. That can be really helpful. But again, it's going to depend on the age of those siblings in terms of how much you would engage them.
What are helpful ways for kids and families to navigate stress?
So we've been talking about these all night. Several times you've heard put on your oxygen mask first, and you really need to do that. So think about what is going on right now. Try to think positively. Sometimes you just let things go. It's okay. We don't have control of everything, like the long line of cars. So, there's lots of ways to help yourself get through that, and I think it's teaching yourself what your coping skills are. For me personally, I take 3 or 4 deep breaths and go back to it. Sometimes I can just put it away in my brain because I'm at work right now and I'm dealing with healthcare for other people, and then think about it when I get home. I don't put it away forever, however, because you do have to eventually deal with your stress.
What can I do to take care of myself and not feel guilty when I should be taking care of my children?
Ban guilt. Ban guilt. But I have experienced quite a lot of guilt, through my time as a parent. I think the way to think about it is, again, if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of others. And it doesn't mean that you're taking a trip to Hawaii for 2 weeks and leaving your kids home alone, right? It means that you're taking 5 minutes here or there. It means that when they go to bed, and it's 10 o'clock, that you're taking 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe it's reading a couple of pages in a book, or, journaling, or doing something like that. But we really have to do that in order to help our kids. And again, we're showing our kids that, yeah, it's a really stressful situation, and here's the things that I need to do to be able to take care of you. And when we lose it, which we all are going to do when there's all this stress happening, right? It's the grace and space again, and to tell them, I'm sorry. It's, as you all know, this is a really difficult time, and I just had too much stress today, and now I'm going to take care of it, and I'm going to do. But the reason to ban guilt is that it doesn't help. It doesn't help you do better next time. It just makes you feel really crappy, honestly. And we already have enough reasons to feel crappy without kind of adding that onto our plate. And so, as parents, we do the best that we can with what we have in that moment, and that's the way we have to think about it. And we are all still here. We are still a family, and so we are just going to move forward. And I think that's all you can do.
All right, thank you to each of you for those responses. We also want to share a few resources that are available to families. These messages have been shared with our secondary students a few different times this fall and will continue to be shared. And our counseling staff, our social workers, our school psychologists, our nurses, all have this information, as well as our school-based mental health therapists available in their offices, and it's shared with students frequently so that they have the information should they be in crisis. We also want to share them with you here today. If there is an immediate emergency, you need to make sure that you're calling 911 if somebody's in physical danger. Always let a trusted adult know. And then we have the Anoka County Mobile Crisis Response Service here, as well as Hennepin County, listed for families. They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to support crisis planning, safety planning, and support you through navigating some of that information. Additionally, we also have our National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. As Sue mentioned, highly encourage you to put it into your phone. It's there. You don't have to worry. We know when we're stressed, our brains can't always access information, and you think about kind of how fumbly you might get or concerned. If it's in there right now tonight while you're listening to us up here, put it in your phone and you have access to it should you need it. Additionally, the crisis text line is up there, and then the mobile crisis team. I also want to say for those parents out there who learn of any information of a peer or on social media, if you hear of a student's friend or anything that you're concerned about, do reach out and connect with someone at the school. Do not hesitate to, often right now with schedules and the way things are going with this unpredictable year, feel free to keep calling. If you leave a voicemail and you think, boy, I'm just worried about this, it's sitting with me, go ahead and call the secretary or go call an admin assistant and say, I'd like to just talk with somebody. I just need someone to know this information so that we can get the right person connected with the student who has expressed a need. All right, if anyone has questions, you're not sure where to start, you're not sure who the appropriate contact is at school, go ahead and email the Anoka-Hennepin Parent Involvement Office. The email is listed right up here, parentinvolvement@ahschools.us, and someone will connect you with your school social worker or school-based mental health therapist, somebody who can answer your questions and connect with you so you are not in it alone. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank you for joining us. We want to thank our panel and everybody for being a part of this. Barbie, do you want some final words?
Just the last couple things. Again, Sue, the entire panel, thank you so much. It's really critical that we have these conversations. So just being able to have this evening, super important for our entire community. Thank you so much to all the participants, the folks who are here in person, as well as those of you at home. It's really important that we take this time to have these conversations. We truly appreciate your partnership in supporting our students and our communities and our families of Anoka-Hennepin. We have some upcoming Parent Engage 360 events as well. Those include January 20th, we will have a screening of the documentary Like. On February 3rd, we will have social media and internet safety. And we will conclude with chemical health in April, on April 7th. For more information about those, please be sure to register and visit our website at ahschools.us/ParentEngage360. So just doing a quick Google, but ahschools.us/ParentEngage360. You can register, you can find out more information. Thank you again, thank you so much. Take care and have a great